and Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.
Welcome to IBM TV International Broadcast Media. I'm Bill Trusmont, your host, and this is The Lawyer's Den, a unique program that brings together individuals, thought leaders, legal scholars to discuss issues of the day. Tonight, we have a very interesting topic. It promises to be lively, it promises to be informative, and I'm glad you are here. Now, once again, I need to go see if I can find my gentleman out there in the world somewhere. Where are you? Where are you? With Nick. Hey, buddy.
Well, you're going to have to bring me in because my computer locked me out.
All right. Well, all right.
Rightfully so, I guess.
So let me do your introduction first, Nick, while you collect your thoughts for a moment. Nick is a 3-time state champion in the state of Florida, chess champion. He also happens to be quite the accomplished attorney over a number of years. He's taken cases to the Supreme Court. He also happens to know talent when he sees it. And so, Nick, which talent would you like to bring in today to introduce? Well,
since I can't see anybody below there, let's bring in our gentleman from BYU. He also received an LLM from George Washington University. So let's bring in the person that everybody should know here on the Lawyer's Den by now. This is Jeff Teichert. Jeff, welcome to the show. Attorney number 1.
Okay.
Now, attorney number 2 hails from the University of Denver, where she received her JD and also received a master's in law from the University of Denver, which, by the way, a teaching degree, otherwise known as an LLM for the law students that are there. Let's bring in Guidry Stantonite. Guidry, welcome to the show. Okay. And this person that we will not forget actually went to the University of Southern California and also went to the Ohio State University where he received his law degree, his LLM from the New York University, and also has a degree from the University of Alabama, a professor at Georgia College, Adam Lamparero.
How you doing, Nick? Good to see you.
Finally, this person hails from State University of New York at Albany, and then decide to leave Albany and shuffle away from Buffalo and head to New York City, where he practices law as a street fighter, otherwise known as Fernando Leal. Fernando! And this is the Lawyer's Den. And of course, we have the Den Master, who also went to the State University of New York at Albany, the Honorable Bill Trezevant, the Den Master. Bill, welcome back to the Lawyer's Den. And of course, you're in control of the boards, as they would say in Jeopardy. And you also get in control of what topic. What are we discussing today?
Yes, well, first, today's going to be interesting, but I do just want to make a point of personal privilege. Fernando and I are not ashamed of having hailed from Buffalo, but yeah, that's where we shuffle off from. Nevertheless, this is going to be an interesting show. Today, it's, well, police reform. We are at an inflection point in our society with certain events moving forward that have caught the nation's attention and indeed the world's attention. So for our national audience and our international audience, this is going to be a discussion unlike other discussions that we've had. Most other discussions of most other panelists seem to think that dissecting in detail, retroactively, the issues is an important feature. However, we here at the Lawyer's Den believe in forward thinking, so we're going to be covering the Chauvin verdict. But we're going to
the Chauvin what?
The Chauvin. Eric Chauvin, the police officer, was convicted today.
COVID got convicted?
Chauvin got convicted.
Chauvin got convicted?
You could be saying Chauvin.
But wait a minute. What did he get convicted of anyway?
Well, interestingly enough, we have our subject matter experts on this panel. And so why don't I just do this? First, let's go to the gentleman that believes in the position of the prosecution, and that's Jeff. Jeff, can you explain to poor Nick, who has no control over his computer, what happened today that the whole world is now seeing? Jeff?
Well, Officer Derek Chauvin went down on all counts, was convicted second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter for a grand total of possibly 70 years, although, as you may know, he won't be sentenced for a few weeks still.
Yeah.
But yeah, he went down on all counts, and I think as we proceed in this show, I'd like our audience to remember that yesterday I predicted this verdict. I was pretty confident in it. There are members of our panel who are now going to say this verdict gets overturned on appeal. I am telling you, it gets sustained on appeal, and I'll explain why later. But
okay, excellent. And speaking of that, Adam, I'm coming to you, and Fernando, I'm coming to you next, and Guidry, we're going to round out, and then Nick, hopefully your education will be complete, and you'll have something to say. So, Adam, Fernando, please. Adam?
The verdict gets overturned on appeal for the following reasons. Third-degree murder requires that you engage in conduct that presents a danger to others, to multiple people. Chauvin's actions presented a danger to one person, George Floyd. Number two, you cannot convict people on logically inconsistent charges. For example, second-degree felony murder requires that you have a purposeful intent to harm someone. Second-degree manslaughter requires you to act negligently. You can't find that someone acted purposefully and simultaneously negligently. That's like me saying, I'm going to convict you for accidentally running over somebody with a car, but I'm also going to convict you for purposefully running that person over. It's logically inconsistent. The verdict will be overturned on appeal, and Chauvin will ultimately serve time for one of the three charges.
Okay, Fernando, you're up.
Yeah. I agree with what Adam said, and to me, this is a verdict based on a jury that was scared of mob rule because they were going to go and burn down Minnesota if they didn't charge him on all three counts. Like I said, I think that he should have been convicted of, and I said this yesterday, and I still feel the same way after watching the trial, should have been second-degree manslaughter because that's what fits all the facts that came into evidence the best. The other two convictions just brought an appeal, along with what Maxine Waters said.
All right, Guidry, you're on the hot seat. What do you got, Guidry?
Well, first of all, I'm very surprised. I definitely did not expect the jury to take only 9 hours to deliver the verdict, and I'm conflicted. It's a tough day. It's a happy day for some. Justice has to be served. We had a bad cop got sentenced. The question is, was this sentence accurate to his crime? And I will join Fernando, as I did previously. I do think that manslaughter case was a strongly demonstrated. When it comes to second and third degree murder, I will agree with that. I think that it's a little bit overreach. We'll see. And I think there are a couple other issues that will be mentioned or addressed in appeals, such as media coverage and purposeful address and pressure to the jury. All having decided and having a trial in the center of the city, which the city was in danger for the protest during every single day. The jurors who entered the courtroom had to go through the George Floyd Square and Circle and see the protest and be heard of what could happen if they do not reach the verdict. Again, I'm going to go back to 9 hour time taking to reach the verdict, and it's a little bit troubling to me.
Okay, Nick, coming up.
Oh, Bill, I really don't want to gloat and rub it in to Adam as much as I really do want to do that. And Guidry's surprise, if she listened to the tape yesterday, I said, this will take place, it'll be done by tomorrow if I was on the jury. And so the thing is, this is no surprise, Guidry. I don't know why you guys are so surprised. And Adam being wrong, that's definitely not a surprise, as we've seen this over and over again on The Lawyer's Den. And me and Jeff being right, not a surprise also. So I don't even know why we're having this conversation. We knew this was all going to happen. The only people who didn't want to happen or believed delusionally that wasn't going to happen was Fernando and Adam. Those were the only two guys who didn't think this was going to happen. And now they believe delusionally that, of course, it's got to be overturned on appeal. And it ain't going to be overturned on appeal. This is over with. The only question is, how long is the sentence going to be? It'll be a concurrent sentence, so the most will be is 40 years. But I'm not sure how long the sentence is going to be. That'll be a subject, I guess, of another Lawyer's Den. But why are we having this conversation? Go look at our tape yesterday. I knew the answer yesterday. Why do we have to do this all over again?
Well, Nick, first of all, we're going to get to the aggravating mitigated circumstances because that's really the underbelly of the grunt work that lawyers do after the trial. And we're going to get to that in a few moments. But I do want to kind of ask this, that, Nick, I know that you remember this, that there are always the major offenses and then the minor included offenses that are the lower charges that are included in any of the major offenses. Now, Adam seems to be making a specious kind of argument that says that just because you get convicted of a larger sentence, a more serious sentence, that you can't be convicted of subsequent sentences because somehow it's illogical. Now, Nick, what do you make of that argument? Because I found it very
why I make it, this was what they call a trifecta, 1, 2, 3, and he's out. And the thing is, and I and Jeff were both on record, we have the tape, that he was going to go down all the way. The only people that were obstinate was your friend Adam and Fernando, who were delusional about it. And Jeff and I knew all along this was going to happen. So what's the big surprise? And I said it was going to happen like in 24 hours. And Guidry's going, I can't believe it was so fast. Of course.
Okay. And on that,
so everything happened the way it should happen.
Okay, Jeff, I'm coming to you. Guidry, I'm coming to you, and then Fernando and Adam, I'm keeping you guys next to me because I'm going to let you loose in a minute. But just hang on here for a second. Now, Jeff,
do you feel a connection to us?
Oh yeah, my heart beats pitter patter. Don't mind me.
I'll give Adam some egg and he can spread it all over his face.
Right. So Jeff, I'm just I just kind of want to flesh this out, and that is to say that is it intellectually dishonest to be convicted of multiple charges, or is it really just a trifecta like you and Nick predicted in a previous show?
No, I haven't researched whether manslaughter is a lesser included offense in Minnesota for second or third degree murder. On what Adam said about third degree, that you have to endanger persons, more than one people, he may have forgotten that Chauvin actually brandished his pepper spray at bystanders. I think that qualifies as persons.
Excellent point.
Also, when we talk about the verdict that we got from the jury, we have to understand, and I'm saying this for the benefit of people in other countries or others who aren't very familiar with American law. When we go on appeal, when we take a case up to the Court of Appeals or then to the Supreme Court, as is the case in Minnesota, it isn't a retrial of the whole case again. It is a review of whether or not the lower court did its job in a legally proper way. And they are very loath to overturn the factual findings of a jury. And to quote the Minnesota Supreme Court in 2016 in the case called State versus Griffin, when evaluating the sufficiency of the evidence, appellate courts carefully examine the record to determine whether the facts and legitimate inferences drawn from them would permit the jury to reasonably conclude that the defendant was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the offense of which he was convicted. The evidence must be viewed in a light most favorable to the verdict, and it must be assumed that the fact finder disbelieved any evidence that conflicted with the verdict. The verdict will not be overturned if the fact finder, upon application of the presumption of innocence and the state's burden of proving an offense beyond a reasonable doubt, could reasonably have found the defendant guilty of the charged offense. So, unless the factual findings of the jury are clearly erroneous, unless there is a manifest injustice, the appellate court is not going to overturn this thing on appeal. Now, I can understand the argument Adam and Fernando were making yesterday about, well, maybe it was the drugs, maybe it was this other stuff. And I said, I don't think that's going to work because in this same course of conduct, the guy died. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think the jury's going to think that's a coincidence. Even if you believed their argument, could a reasonable person say, well, gee, no matter how fragile this guy was, it wasn't Chauvin and kneeling on the guy's neck for 9.5 minutes that pushed him over the edge and ultimately ended his life. I don't think they're going to find, the appellate court is going to find that as an unreasonable conclusion. One final thought, I think 10 hours to review circumstances that took place over 9.5 minutes is not unreasonably fast. It wasn't a long, convoluted case. I think this guy went down. He's going to stay down on appeal.
Okay, Fernando and then Adam. Fernando, your thoughts?
Look, my thoughts haven't changed. The issue here is, did the knee actually cause the death, or was it a combination of things? And then, is the maneuver that he used a maneuver that he is trained to use to subdue people who they apprehend? And the truth is that he was a suspect who was a problem, who when he got into the car...
Wait, with an alleged $20 fake bill. I mean, let's put this in perspective.
Listen to me. I don't care if it's an alleged $20 bill. The fact is he committed a crime and he got arrested.
No, he didn't commit a crime.
He did commit a crime.
You're innocent.
He was trying to buy something with fake money.
You're innocent until proven guilty. You agree with that, don't you, Fernando?
You are. But he was arrested as a suspect, as a criminal, period. I don't care what the crime was. I don't care if it was stealing a lollipop from a 2-year-old. The fact is, he was handcuffed. He was arrested, period. At that point, now they walk him to the car. All of a sudden now, he's claustrophobic when they arrested him in his car. Next, he gets into the car. He starts kicking and thrashing around, and they have to pull him out. He spits drugs out into the back of the car. You can roll your eyes all you want. The drugs were in his mouth, and he was trying to eat them so that he wouldn't get busted with the drugs and get a drug charge also.
Fernando's right.
Right, so let's ignore that. Let's only concentrate on the facts that you like.
No, Fernando, you're relitigating the case. The jury heard all of that evidence, and the jury came down with the verdict.
And again, my point is, I don't think that the second and third degree charges should have been given a conviction. I believe he is guilty of manslaughter based on the evidence that I saw.
Okay.
Now, what the appellate courts in Minnesota do, I think that second and third degree should be overturned. There are other issues that are going to be appealed, such as that they didn't get sequestered. They should have been sequestered from the beginning of this trial, not at the end of the trial. That didn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
And then the comments by the politicians, that's going to be another issue for appeal because it could be viewed as undue influence on the jury.
Okay. Adam.
Jeff is flat out wrong in 3 ways. Number 1, third-degree murder under Minnesota law requires that you engage in conduct that presents a danger to the life of others, multiple people. It's typically applied, for example, if you shoot a gun into a crowd. Chauvin endangered the life of one person, Floyd. Pepper spray does not endanger the lives of others. Number 2, Jeff admits he didn't research the second-degree murder in Minnesota. I did. Second-degree felony murder requires that you have a purposeful intent to harm. Second-degree manslaughter requires that you negligently harm somebody. You can't convict on both because the mental states are inconsistent. That's like saying, as I said, I'm going to convict you for accidentally running over somebody and for purposefully running them over. It's logically inconsistent. And number 3, the standard on appeal, as Jeff should know, is going to be de novo review. De novo review means that the court looks at the legal questions as if they're looked at them for the first time. And the legal questions will be whether third-degree murder could be charged when only one person was the subject of Chauvin's behavior. And number 2, whether you can convict somebody when the mental states are conflicting and therefore require only a conviction on one charge. They will overturn the decision.
Okay, Guidry, because we're going to put Adam downstairs in the basement for a while. And Jeff,
you can attack me, but you can't attack the facts.
Jeff, you get to occupy a position right up here at the top with the winners. Now, Guidry, I guess my question for you is that in the law, in your practice, sometimes you plead in the alternative when you file a case. Isn't that right? You have go into 2 different theories of the case.
But you can only convict on one.
Adam, you had your turn, please. So, Guidry, how is it any different than the prosecution in this case going in and pleading 3 different bases for guilty, and then the jury coming back and saying, boom, trifecta? How is that any different that Adam seems so angry about? Guidry?
Well, each case is different, each fact pattern is different, and therefore each approach is different. In this particular case, I think what the conduct of Chauvin's against Floyd could be categorized in different periods of time or different elements. So at certain point, his conduct was negligent when he decided to press the knee, for instance, to his neck for a longer time. However, after hearing multiple attempts of Floyd saying that he cannot breathe longer, or that he was unconscious, that he noticed that at that point he got an intent by not stopping the crime, and also not providing certain medical assistance could be construed as another indicator of his whether negligence or intent. And I think that would be the only reasonable explanation of how all those three crimes could be included into this one charge, and why all of those three crimes were found to be guilty.
Okay, now we're going to pivot for a moment because, our audience, they're going to get this news in various forms, but I think that we've really summarized the details and exposed the various views of the case and the convictions. I want to turn to this because it was curious for me. The entire world thinks that now that we got to the end of the trial and we have a jury verdict, that's the end of the story, when in fact it's not. And we as lawyers know that what's up next is the sentencing guidelines. Now, Nick, because this is really the underbelly, this is really when attorneys really try to earn their dollars outside of the public limelight. Can you explain to our audience what goes into the sentencing stuff? I mean, to the extent you can. If not, I always got Jeff, your best friend, right next to you.
Yeah, I'm glad I have Jeff. I did more appellate work than I did actually sentencing guidelines. Matter of fact, I was in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals so often that I was thinking about just parking a car there as I was arguing before those judges. And here's the problem, okay, and here's the reality of this, and I know that Adam doesn't want to hear that in Georgia. The odds, and this is published in ssrn.com, the odds of you winning, reversing on appeal is like less than 24%. So I'm odds-on favored that this thing is going to get upheld on appeal. I also believe when Chauvin talked to the prosecutor, he was saying, you're going to file appeal, right? Because everybody's under this delusion that those appellate judges are going to overturn this. And trust me, that's a big delusion. And you can make those crazy legal arguments. Standard of review is important. I have a whole book on the standard of review, a de novo standard, very important. But you, Adam, and you, Fernando, continually argue the facts. You'll be bounced out of court so fast, it'll make your head spin. You better find some law counselor that this can be turned over, and I don't see any. So you better go find some heavy-duty law. Otherwise, you're going to get nothing in the appellate court, and this thing's going to stand. And then the only issue is what you just want to describe as sentencing, and I would defer that to my subject matter expert, who was also on the right side of this, Jeff Teichert.
Well, Jeff, there's your invitation, because this is one of those dark underbellies that people don't realize. Can you explain to our audience generally how the sentencing goes, and what, because they're going to be hearing a lot about this, what aggravating and or mitigating circumstances are when it comes to the recommendation or the ultimate sentence, somewhere between 0 and 70 years. Jeff?
Well, I don't know that I'm the subject matter expert when it comes to sentencing. I'm a civil litigator, and so I have much more experience, and I've done a lot of appellate work. I've argued maybe 12 judicial appeals and 20 or 30 administrative appeals. So I don't claim to understand sentencing guidelines in great detail. I do know that in this case, Chauvin is subject to a maximum 40 years for the second-degree murder charge, and I think it's 20 for the third degree and possibly 10 for the manslaughter charge. I don't believe that he will get the maximum in all of those areas, but I know that when they sentence, they'll take into account a variety of aggravating and mitigating circumstances to determine what they think is just. Now, in terms of the appeal, Adam is partly right and partly wrong. The appellate court will review the legal conclusions of the lower court de novo, or meaning as if they were reviewing them for the first time. But the factual findings, they are not going to disturb unless they find that they were manifestly unreasonable, and they're not going to find that in this case. So I think, to the extent that we're going back to relitigate the facts and say that there were all these things that called Chauvin's guilt into question. The appellate court, I predict, is not even going to look at that. The question is going to be, for example, did the judge instruct the jury incorrectly on the law?
Right.
Or, was there evidence used that was illegally obtained? But to the extent that the jury was correctly instructed, they're not going to overturn this verdict.
Okay, fine. On that point, I just kind of want to pick this up just to kind of further delineate this for our audience, and that is with regard to the sentencing guidelines. Essentially, what's going to happen is that the prosecution gets to go into court and say to the judge, we think this guy deserves X number of years in jail on each count that he was convicted on, and they're probably going to be looking for the maximum. Now, first and foremost, our audience needs to understand the difference between concurrent and consecutive. Consecutive means that when Jeff mentioned the number of years attached to each conviction, the second-degree murder, which carries up to 40 years, the third degree, which carries up to 20 years, and the manslaughter, which carries up to 10 years. If those are consecutive, they are served one after the other. You have to serve one, complete that, serve the next, complete that, and then serve the third one, in which case there is a maximum penalty or punishment of 70 years, in this case facing the defendant. And the alternative, a court can decide to have the defendant serve the sentences what we call concurrent, which means they're all served at the same time. So the defendant could get 5 years off for manslaughter, could get 5 years for the second degree, and then get 10 years for the second degree murder. So it would be a total of 10 years for the second degree murder, but as he's serving all 10, the two other sentences are being served at the same time. So that's the first distinction. Now, the second thing is that the judge will take into recommendation. The prosecution is going to say, well, we believe it ought to be X number of years because we believe that these are aggravating factors. That is, things that just make his behavior that much more outrageous, that much more beyond the pale. Now, the defense is going to come in and with character witnesses, as we always know when we watch on television, and say that, no, my guy's a good guy. He's a loving husband. He's got a child. He's been an upstanding citizen. These are all the reasons why he should get less time in jail. That's the difference between aggravating and mitigating circumstances. And those are arguments that are made behind the scenes and eventually presented to the judge prior to the judge sentencing. And so in this case, the judge is going to sentence, it's scheduled for sentencing in 2 months. With that having been said, what I'd like to do in this very novel show at this point, for the purpose of our audience, I want to turn our attention because it seems to me that, and this is open-ended for our panelists, and I'm just going to go around the horn in a lightning manner. Oftentimes in our society, we find ourselves at inflection points. That is points where we know that our society will never be the same. That is to say, we're never going to go back to the way we were. Now, there are voices talking about in the future about where they want us to go. Those voices may be deep on the police. Other voices may be police reform. Other people may be talking about different things. But this is an inflection point, it occurs to me, and where our society is really going to decide. Now, I don't think that we're going to end up in utopia, where some people believe we ought to be, but I do know that we're not going back to where we were. And so on this very big area, it's going to become a buzzword, and that is police reform. What does it mean? What does it look like? What do you think it ought to look like? And how are you thinking about it? I'm going to start with you, Guidry, and just to get everybody ready. Guidry, Fernando, Adam. Guidry, Fernando, Adam. So,
well, that's a very great point, and I think we need more dialogue. We need to talk more together. The division needs to melt, and we need to understand that yes, there are bad cops, but there are a lot of good cops, and yes, we have some issues, and social, racial issues are still existing there. But we need to talk. We do not need to separate each other or to divide one from another. We need to. I think. Another thing I don't understand, I never understood the police defunding argument. I think it misses so many points into healing or really addressing something constructively. In fact, I think differently. I think we should invest more money in police, in training the police, in providing services such as different mental assistance, psychological assistance, if it is needed. It's a very intensive work, and especially right now after this case, it's going to be needed to be addressed and to not only to see as an enemy, but really as a big part of our society and to heal.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, Adam, there's Guidry. I think that's part of the utopian point of view. What's your point of view, Adam? Since you're law and order, Adam, and I'm military Bill. Adam?
I think this whole discussion is ridiculous.
Oh my God! Really?
Yes. let me be very clear for the audience. All right. 90 to 95% of the time when lethal force is used, the suspect is armed and resisting. Of the 62 plus million encounters with police every year, only a fraction, an infinitesimal amount involve force. In fact, African Americans stand a 0.00000015 chance of being killed by the police.
Oh my
Also,
God.
we have to address. Let's talk about the difficult facts that nobody wants to talk about.
Well,
The fact that 72% of African American children grow up in single parent families. The fact that 51% of murders are committed by African Americans who comprise 13% of the population. The fact that dropout rates exceed substantially those of other races. We don't want to talk about those facts. So if you want to be at an inflection point, then you better use a strong voice that confronts the difficult facts.
Adam, just to be clear for the
This is
record here,
completely ridiculous.
Adam, I didn't choose this inflection point. Derek Chauvin, your white officer, chose this one this time. Just to be
That
clear,
is a load of bullshit.
Adam, you had your turn, please. Now, I mean, and I get where you're going, and I hear it from you that you're just an original.
Yeah, but you don't want to talk about those issues.
No, I want to get to Fernando, but I just want to point out to you because you think that you can't be questioned. I'm simply saying to you that I want to get your position correct. My position that I hear you saying is simply, no, we shall not change because these are all the bad things, and I see no future. That's what I hear from you. Fernando, do you see a different
Wait, that is incorrect. I'm saying that's not the problem. Police brutality is overblown. The real problem lies in the community. Okay, and we have to address those problems, namely single parenthood.
Do you have a solution? Because we're done at the point where there's a problem. The whole world.
Yes, I do have a solution.
What?
Educational equality. We need to give African Americans every educational opportunity possible and pathways to the middle class.
Okay.
We have to stop focusing on police brutality because it's a non-issue. It's overblown by the media.
Okay, Fernando, your partner in the two kid on the verdict has clearly left out the brown people of the world. He's just concerned about black people. What are your thoughts moving forward about police reform, if any at all, Fernando?
Brother, listen. A lot of this, in terms of this verdict being this huge and this and that and the other, is being overblown by the media. The bottom line is, it's because it's a white on black crime. If this were a black officer and a black suspect, or a black officer and a white suspect, we would have never heard about the verdict. We wouldn't have known about the verdict. We wouldn't have known what the hell happened. In terms of police departments, it's an ever-evolving mechanism of training. The training that they received in the 1800s isn't the training that they're receiving now. And the training they receive now isn't the training they're going to receive 10 years from now, because things change, science changes, tactical gear changes, the way you do things change. So you keep up with the research, you put that into the force. So for example, in New York City, they used to do that maneuver that Chauvin did. They used to teach it in the academy. Guess what? They stopped teaching it about 20 years ago. And the Minnesota Police Department received the training video from New York City saying, hey, don't do this maneuver because it's not as effective. It could potentially lead to problems. Did they listen? No. So now they got a giant lawsuit. They paid out $27 million. What's going to happen? They're probably going to follow the video that they got from New York City. They're going to start changing the way they train, the way they teach, the way they tell the officers to speak. Adam, there is part of what Adam says is also true. That component also has to be worked on, because there's just a fundamental lack of the ability to speak when people are approached. And speaking, and if you can speak correctly and express yourself, will minimize a lot of issues. Take it from somebody who's been pulled over a lot of times for speeding and running stop signs. If you can talk, you can walk.
So from one lead foot to another. Nick?
Well, I mean, Adam is spot on. This thing is a complete waste of time, except as to a very narrow area, but it's way overblown by the media. In other words, this isn't going to help the black community, ain't going to help the Latino community, help no community at all. The thing that'll change, that we need real change in, is the Gini coefficient. And until we change that, we're not changing anything.
No. Hey, Mr.
Okay.
LLM, Mr.
So I have to agree with Adam here. We got to change the Gini coefficient.
I don't know
baby.
what the Gini
Not the place.
I don't know what that coefficient is.
Look it up. That's the reason you have Wikipedia.
No. See, that's not fair to our national audience and our international audience.
Our international audience has Wikipedia also.
Wow, that is just so chauvinistic of you.
Gini coefficient, baby. Change that, and they'll change the world. Dealing with this issue, we're not going to change the world. All we're going to do is regurgitate the same thing over and over again. Waste of time, but enjoy.
Okay, Jeff, you're up, please.
All right. Well, I agree with Adam about educational equality. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about whether we're at a tipping point as a country when it comes to how we look at regulating police. There is an act called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020 making its way through the House. And my understanding of this, my limited understanding of it, is that it lowers the criminal intent standard from willful to knowing or reckless to convict a law enforcement officer for misconduct in a federal prosecution. Secondly, it limits qualified immunity as a defense to liability in a private civil action against the officer or state correctional officer. And third, it authorizes the Department of Justice to issue subpoenas in investigations of police departments for a pattern or practice of discrimination. Now, I don't have a problem with these particular provisions. What I do have a problem with is the fact that it's a federal law being imposed by Congress under the auspices of enforcement of federal constitutional violations. Okay. I think the act is a violation of the 10th Amendment. I think the solutions to this need to be state and local. They need to be as close to the people as possible. And I am for police reform. I am for community-based policing. And I think we need to get the officers more and more out of their squad cars and out into the community so they know people, so people trust them, and there's a relationship there. I do think there needs to be reform. My problem is, where does the reform occur? And I think it's state and local.
Okay, Guidry, Jeff raises an excellent point because it ties back to the central theme of the Lawyers' Den over time. On the one hand, first, this is a two-part question for you. First, the basic elements of the George Floyd Act that Jeff just outlined, which is limiting qualified immunity, lowering the standard upon which a conviction can be based, that is finding of intent, and giving the Justice Department agreed or increased powers to investigate. Do you have a problem with any of those three provisions, basic provisions? Obviously, the law is a little bit more complicated. But Guidry?
No, I do not have problems with those provisions. Contrary to Jeff, I think that federal regulations, unilateral, unanimous, at the same level regulations as such as procedural regulations should be done on a federal level. I agree with Jeff that there should be community policing, that the community members should go to the police force and be interactive with the community to represent better the same community. It both could be done at the same time. Yesterday, I was having a dinner with my friend, police officer here from Miami, and we were talking about Chauvin's case. And, and we ended up talking about the police reform and the attitudes and how does it work, why there's such a division between, people and police and certain races. And he said, well, a lot of times when we are patrolling, let's say walking down the mall, there are different people. So you have white, brown, people, and I really hate using colors, but they walk with the family. Families walk with the little kids, and the families say, oh, the police officer, he will protect us, or like the kid says, how much I want to be as a police officer, I'm gonna say hi. And African-American families go and they like, no, you don't go to this police officer, you need to stay away. So my point is, and I hate generalizing, and I'm talking with a police officer who is 30 years to go on a pension. So he has a lot good experience, but I think the society itself, we need to have a more dialogue and try to understand that police officers are not enemies, but yet there are still certain issues for which certain federal regulations and body cameras will hopefully help us to address. So I'm very optimistic.
Okay, excellent. You guys are fantastic because it set me up for this. And this gets back to our core. And so I'm going to come to you after Fernando. I'm coming to you, Adam. Then I'm coming back to you, Nick. And that is that we've had this basic discussion between originalists and those who believe the Constitution is a living will. We just heard Jeff enunciate what the George Floyd Act would do, but then also reassert his originalist credentials by suggesting that it shouldn't come from the federal government down. Now, that's in stark contrast to Guidry, who is a living constitutionalist school of thought person. And Fernando, I know you come from the school of living constitution as well. How does this fit with you? That is the George Floyd Act, limiting qualified immunity, lowering the intention of conviction, and increasing the federal regulatory power. And how does that fit with your view of the living will versus an original? And that's why I'm coming to you next, Adam, and I'm giving you time to think. Fernando?
How it fits is that it's a violation of the 10th Amendment. I'm with Jeff 100%. You know, criminal law has always been viewed as an area that is left up to the states and the local municipalities to deal with. There are general federal laws for certain things, but at the end of the day, things like murder and, you know, kidnapping and things of this nature have always been, and rape have been laws that are left up to the state and the local municipalities to deal with. I think this, for me, it's an overstep by the federal government into an area that they shouldn't be going into. And qualified immunity, everybody's stuck on cops with qualified immunity. I guarantee you, if you asked Derek Chauvin and you asked him to start talking, if he was thinking about his qualified immunity when he went into this arrest, he's probably going to tell you, no, that was the furthest thing from my mind. I have a lot of friends and family that are police officers. None of them go into any situation thinking, hey, I have qualified immunity, so you know what? I'm going to run buck wild through this crime scene, and I'm going to do whatever I want. Their actions are dictated what's going on at that time, and that's something that's completely afar from their mind. This is it's an overstep, and it's an overreaction, which is what seems to be happening in this day and age with everything.
Okay, listen, I get your frustration. You're just mad because you're on the losing side. Adam, let me ask you this, because I know generally where you're going to come from, being an originalist.
Not even.
But no, let me ask you this, Adam. There have been times historically, and we've done it as a nation here in the United States, when it's been proven that the states cannot enforce the laws, the federal government has stepped in, which is why they made certain the civil rights law, which is why even if a crime, a murder or some other crime is based on hate or something, isn't pursued by the local government, the federal government can step in. And what I'm doing right now is I'm intentionally using sandpaper on your originalist school of thought side. And that is this. Isn't this necessary because the states and individual municipalities won't stop this ongoing fight with brown and black people? So why shouldn't, at least this once, you bend over as an originalist and just take it from somebody that believes in a living will? Adam?
Pardon my language. I'm so sick and fucking tired of talking about George Floyd and talking about race and systemic racism and white privilege. 95% of the time when lethal force is used, the suspect is armed and resisting. Media is making this out to be an issue that it isn't. 72% of African-American kids grow up in single-parent families. They commit over 3 times the amount of violent crimes based on their population rate, you know? And I'll tell you something. We don't talk about that, do we? We don't talk about the fact that today is the 1-year anniversary of my brother committing suicide. And trying to sue the hospital that mistreated him is difficult because these states give the hospitals immunity from prosecution, no matter how terrible they treat them. You know what? I'm tired of talking about race and about George Floyd, who was a horrific human being. Let's talk about other issues affecting people, and let's talk about a philosophy where we take responsibility for our own actions. We make our own choices, and we address the difficult questions that are affecting inequality, not this bullshit about police brutality. It's nonsense. I don't buy it, and I will not discuss it anymore.
Nick, please.
Hello.
Your thoughts after that spirited
Well, I can't get the Gini coefficient onto the table here for some reason. It's like I thought this was smart television, but what Adam's saying is let's address the real reason behind why all this happens and things that actually help people, as opposed to things that are great for the media. The fact is, hey, look, this crime is great for the media, but it's not addressing the problem. And I listen to a lot of the people chit chat out there. They're not addressing the underlying problem. They're all there beating their chest. Either they won or they lost. So what? It will not make a difference until we change the U.S. Gini coefficient. And nobody's addressing that because half the population here doesn't even know what it is. And the U.S. ranks very poorly in that whole coefficient, really poorly. And when that changes, then you're going to see some real change. But until that, you're going to see the same old stuff over and over again. And everybody's here is like Adam saying, we're just all wasting our time. I mean, I hope everybody enjoys it, but frankly, you're not addressing the real underlying problems relating to
all right. Well, no, Nick, I'm not going to let you get off that easy. I mean, because listen,
Sure.
just look, if the world is drowning, you describing the water isn't sufficient enough. What are your ideas about how we fix it? Listen, we heard it from each of the other guests about what they would do. We heard it from Jeff. We know Adam doesn't want to talk about it anymore, and so at least he's stuck for another 10 minutes. And so, Adam, we'll go to a different subject on a different show, and hopefully we'll welcome you back. But no, Nick, I mean, seriously, how would you go about approaching the problem so that we can avoid even having these kinds of situations moving forward? Because right now we're in no man's land and as a nation moving forward.
Right. Well, it's economic inequality, Bill. I mean, the thing is, and the Gini coefficient actually does address that. In the United States, your mobility is at an all-time low. So if you're born into poverty, you die into poverty. You're born in the top 1%, you die in the top 1%. Mobility is extremely low. And that's through our entire system. It's what they call systemic, between our tax policy, our immigration policy, et cetera, all leans toward that. So what you do is you see what type of neighborhood these people are in, and you see that makes a difference in their behavior. And we don't address that because that's a hard issue to address. And frankly, if we don't address that issue, and that's where Adam is right. If you don't increase people's education, don't give education and economic opportunity, you're never going to climb out of that hole. And Chauvin is one of them. In other words, I believe, first of all, his sentence is going to be about 20 to 30 years. Now I'm on record. He won't get the whole 40. Why? He probably has no priors. Okay. Number two, he probably comes from a class of people that he believes, oh, this is all correct and stuff like that. In other words, this is the way he thought he was supposed to behave. So, but part of it is just that, like I say, it's a big class economic difference. And unless we address the educational issues and the economic issues, you're going to see stuff like this over and over again.
Okay, so just for our audience, if I have this correct, Deidre, you think it's how we approach, how we look at our police officers, and beginning in the home and what we teach our children. Do I have that correct? Okay, and Adam, you believe it's fundamentally the educational system, as does, and it kind of conflates with Nick in terms of socioeconomic and educational structure. Do I have that correct, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I could give you 3 simple solutions to the problem.
Okay, well, I'm going to come back to you. We'll get those 3. I'm glad you're rejoining the conversation because, I love you.
Love you too, Bill.
All right. So, Fernando, I just want to nail down, what do you think that we should be thinking about, whether at this inflection point about moving forward? Education, change of opinion. What do you see as the basic components that might be necessary, Fernando?
It's a combination of continually changing police practices and the way they are trained to deal with situations based on new data that comes up every day. In the education starts in the home. It doesn't start in school. That's something my grandmother used to say. Education starts here by teaching kids manners, teaching them how to speak, teaching them how to act or in the public sphere. And it also, what Adam says, education from books. I don't know about Nick's whole I dream of Gini coefficient and the rest of that nonsense. Because based on his I dream of Gini coefficient, I should have never left Washington Heights and I should still be there. And Sotomayor should never have made it to the Supreme Court. Neither should have Ruth Gator Ginsburg. But hey, what the heck? So
Okay.
I believe that it's a combination of different things that need to be done, which is usually what this, The answer is it's never just one. You fight a war on multiple fronts, never just on one front.
Okay. So, Jeff, as you can hear, most of the panelists, or most of your colleagues, who are all far more learned than I, believe that it's a multi-front war, it's complex, and ultimately it's a heavy societal lift. How are you looking at it, Jeff? And then, Adam, I'm coming to you next. Get your 1, 2, 3 ready.
Well, I do agree that it's a multi-front war and that it's a heavy societal lift. I haven't emphasized education in this broadcast because it wasn't the original topic. I would say I recall George W. Bush talking all the time about the soft bigotry of low expectations. And he thought that educational opportunity was the civil rights issue of our time. I agree with that also, but I think education has always been a state and local issue, and I don't want to see all the standards coming from Washington, D.C. and the Department of Education. I think that's going to not be tailored enough to local issues and local situations. I also think I visited China as part of the business and trade delegation a couple of years ago, end of 2017, and we toured several schools over there. I'm telling you, those kids are going to school 16 hours a day, and I'm not exaggerating. But they are training obedient factory workers. They are not training people to be creative problem solvers and innovators. And that is why the Chinese are the thing they're the most gifted at is stealing other people's technology and replicating it really cheap. And so I think we've got to look at our education system not to train factory workers, but to train the innovators and inventors and problem solvers of the next generation. And I think to some degree, our education system has been an industrial revolution education system for too long. We've been training obedient factory workers, only not as hard and not as many hours. So, because our kids have had the opportunity to play sports and play with each other and all kinds of things, we have created innovators. Whether that's going to continue is a good question, but we do have to find more solutions about how to help those that have been left behind by the system as it is. And many of those are people of color.
Okay. Now, Adam, I know you have your 1, 2, 3, but I'm throwing you a softball, believe it or not, because I can't have you be cranky all the time because I know that's not in your heart. Now, it seems to me that what we've heard from our colleagues, because they all seem to cite you as a base support. Now, I find that curious, but, hey, to each their own. I mean, the jury found Chauvin guilty, which you disagree with. So, but I guess the question here is that with these changes, I think, is it fair to say that people would ultimately expect a ripple effect through the generation, which would ultimately affect how we police ourselves? Is that fair to say? And then give us your 1, 2, 3, Adam, please.
That's certainly fair to say, and I'll speak directly to the African-American community and to all communities for that matter. Number 1, graduate from high school. Get your high school degree. Number 2, don't impregnate your high school sweetheart and don't have children before marriage or before you're financially stable. Number 3, don't commit crimes. If you do those 3 things, 98% of people who do those 3 things enter the middle class. To the Black community, you are not victims. You are not oppressed. You are smart, you're entrepreneurial, and you're capable of doing anything that you want. The Democratic Party, remember, was the party of the Ku Klux Klan. They don't care about you. Graduate from high school and get an education.
Okay,
don't get someone pregnant and don't commit crime.
Okay.
And you'll be on your way.
Okay, this is not a.
But you cut me off because you don't want to talk about the real issues.
No, I don't want to talk about
George Floyd.
No, I don't want to talk about Democrats or Republicans. I cut you off because I want to get to Guidry. Because Guidry, I want to give Guidry a chance to say something, and I got your 1, 2, and 3, and it was quite succinct, by the way. Thank you, Guidry.
Well, I wish it was that easy to not to do all those 1, 2, 3. There is a reason why those things happen. That's
not easy.
Oh, Adam.
It's not easy to graduate high school and not impregnate someone and not commit crime.
Adam, when you are 16, your brain is not developed to the level as it is when you are 18. It's biologically shown. Then there are also socioeconomic factors, the same you were talking about. when someone does not have a better example, or so many different reasons really why people make certain decisions, especially kids make certain decisions. So I agree, it would be great in a perfect world. Please, people, don't do 1, 2, 3, all kinds of people. But really, we need to take also responsibility and be a little bit more understanding of why those things are being done and how to make it better, rather than, hey, do it like that. I wish there was a magic pill or like a magic door so we could really resolve this issue.
The magic pill is having a strong family.
Okay, no.
Strong two-parent family.
But Adam, how many, so people choose not to have a strong family? People choose
Yes, they do.
families and then completely
Yes, they do.
different. Like, come on, Adam.
72% of African American kids grow up in single-parent families. Oh, but you want to make them victims rather than responsible for the choice.
Come on, Adam.
Polish.
You can make the society victims all you want. I don't believe it.
I'm begging you, Adam.
Not going to help anybody, Guidry.
Adam, I'm begging you, please. Guidry, and then I'm coming to you, Fernando, quickly, and then Nick, I'm coming to you. Guidry, please finish up your sentence.
So I'm just finishing that. Hopefully in the next future TV shows, Adam will give us better explanation or better options how to not to do those things, looking more in depth of it. I'm saying that as society, as a community, we need to work together. We need to understand each other, and we need to understand that every single life and community is also different, and therefore leads to certain conclusions or actions.
Fernando, can you give me about maybe 30, 45 seconds, and then Nick, I'm coming to you, please.
Yeah. The 3 rules that Adam just cited were the 3 rules that I was raised with in my house. Don't show up here with anybody pregnant. Number 2, don't go out and commit any crimes, because if a cop shows up at the store, you're going to jail. And number 3, you're going to get an education, because you're not going to live here if you're going to be a bum. And the problem is that there is a breakdown in the family unit, and these things aren't being stressed in the home. And, the motto of this nation kind of could solve some of our problems. E pluribus unum, which is what I said in a prior show. You mix everybody together, get everybody talking, and things start getting better over time. It isn't going to be overnight. Everybody wants everything instantaneously. That's not going to happen.
Okay, I apologize, Nick, because Adam's 1, 2, 3 just caused me to think of a question that I have for Jeff. Jeff, I know that the point of this program, at least at the editing section, although it is a wide-ranging, free-ranging discussion group, and that is with police reform. Do you think any of Adam's 1, 2, 3 approach might be helpful as we move forward with police reform? Like, listen, police don't commit the crime. Don't kill people, learn and educate and talk to yourself more about who's in the community. I mean, could an approach to police reform be as simple as 1, 2, 3 along the rules that Adam suggested, Jeff?
Well, I don't know that what Adam suggested has anything to do with police reform. I do believe the family is the fundamental unit of society, and that if we're going to fix our problems, that's where it has to start. I believe that happens more in our churches and in our communities than on a federal level, but I am happy to support policies that encourage the normative message to people that the family is the fundamental unit of society. I think we've gone downhill in that regard, frankly, since Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973, and we decided that the value of unborn human life is 0. So I think there's a whole lot of things that have contributed to a normative message that life is an individual odyssey of your own, and you just get divorced if you feel like getting divorced and having a hard time making your marriage work and don't think about the kid. So I mean, I think, and I say this as a divorced person, but I think we're too cavalier about it, frankly. I think it is a problem if 71% of Black children are raised in a single parent home, and frankly, a very high percentage of white children and children of other races in this country too. So, yeah, those are where the fundamental problems are. And you look at the statistics on children of divorce; they're not pretty. They have a harder time in school. They have a harder time in terms of the criminal justice system. So, yeah, I do think those are the answers. I don't know that there's a particular federal policy that is going to fix all that. But.
Okay, thank you. And Nick, I had a special surprise for you because you've been so patient on your day of difficulty. Yeah, I left and reserved the final 60 seconds for you. And as you know, in TV time, that's 2 commercials. So the last 60 seconds, and you help me land this plane, please. Nick, it's up to you. And please don't mention Gini coefficient again. I hate being talked over.
Okay, I won't. Instead, I'll mention EdTech. Okay, because the thing is, EdTech is the helpful solution to the problems that we're seeing right now. And for EdTech, for those people who don't know, and that's going to probably be one of the fastest growing fields in the next 10 to 20 years. It's introducing game theory to all the young students out there, using artificial intelligence and VR to support them in behavioral changes. That will actually make a difference in the next 10 or 20 years. This case will not make a difference in the next 10 or 20 years. He'll probably be sentenced for 20 or 30 years, whatever. If it's below 40, people are going to protest, whatever. It's not going to put any more, steak and salmon in their home, and they're not going to be on a golf course and a tennis court, which I'll be on tomorrow. Because the thing is, if your economic situation isn't changing, you're not changing. And that's a big problem that we have in the United States. And you don't have to work 16 hours a day like in China. There are ways to do it using EdTech that could actually really change the whole composition of the United States of America. We have to start embracing these new ideas rather than repelling them.
Okay. Lightning round. Anybody have any concluding thoughts before I hand it over to Nick to help me land this plane? Anybody, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Jeff.
Okay, one more.
Jeff for $200. I'm running the boards.
One more idea that might sound a little radical, but I'm actually borrowing this from former Senator Gary Hart, who was a Democrat. He advocated in his book, Minutemen, universal military and police training in high school. I believe in that. I believe in the idea that law enforcement is all of our responsibility, and that if we're all engaged in law enforcement, we're going to not only do a better job of it, but law enforcement is going to be broadly representative of the entire community rather than just certain segments of it. And everybody can pitch in when they see a crime being committed and do something about it. So that's another element of police reform to me. Get the whole community involved.
Okay.
Do that through police
Remember,
and military training in high school.
Lightning round. Okay, Fernando.
Yeah, I think part of the reform should be Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There you go. Part of the reform should be getting the police out into the community and getting them into schools to explain to kids what their jobs actually are and try to lessen some of that fear that is instilled in them at home and what they see on TV. And as for the Derek Chauvin trial, the only thing it's going to do is line the pockets of people like Reverend Al Sharpton and the media who are going to continue to race wrangle.
Okay. Guidry, Adam, anything before I hand it over to Nick?
Yes, your choices, not your circumstances, determine your destiny.
Okay, Guidry?
Yeah, I'm not gonna add anything.
Okay, that's good. See that, Nick? I rest our case for the lawyers. Then, Nick, can you help me land this plane?
I would love to, Bill, but you have control of the engines on this plane. They knocked me off. So you have to press the magic button.
Look, I'm a creature of habit, Nick, and I'm glad you're back because I can't do this without you. That's it for the Lawyer's Den and IBM Television International Broadcast Media. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
And Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.